Every new CMO, if they walk in and say they want to do a rebrand, they should have to read distinctive brand assets, map out where do my assets fall, how memorable are they distinct?
Marketing Architects.
Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Jasper. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Angela Voss, the CEO of Marketing Architects, and Rob DeMars, the Chief Product Architect of Misfits and Machines.
And Elena, always a pleasure.
Hi, guys. We're back with our thought.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
We're back with our thoughts on some recent marketing news, always trying to root our opinions in data, research, and what drives business results. Today, we're talking about competition in marketing. How much should your competition influence your marketing strategy? When should you focus on your competition, and when should you ignore them? We're going to cover all this and more, and I'll admit, I wanted to record this episode partly to satisfy my own curiosity. I was excited to see what research was out there about competition in marketing, and I found a lot of great stuff from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. I'm going to share that to tee up the conversation. So let's start by acknowledging that brand competition does follow some general marketing laws or principles, and competition is unavoidable. According to the double jeopardy law, if you are a smaller brand, you'll not only have fewer buyers, but you'll also share more customers with your competition. And the duplication of purchase law means all brands share customers according to their competitors' market sizes. So a customer that buys from me is also likely to buy from my competition at a rate predicted by my competition's market share. That's irrespective of what I'm up to with marketing. So we're all up against the competition, and if you're a smaller brand or challenger brand, you're especially susceptible to competition. So what can you do about it? That's what we're here to talk about. There's a lot that I want to get to, but I thought it made sense to start very high level with strategy, and then we can make our way into more tactics. So what do we think an ideal focus on the competition looks like?
I tend to believe that we do need to have an understanding of our market actually more than our competitors. And I think that over focus on competitors can really lead to what we would call bunny moves, right? Like incremental moves that can be easily marginalized. I think we can become too reactive rather than being proactive if we're too focused on competitors, and it can lead to this cycle of constantly responding to competitor moves rather than really thinking through innovative strategies that's going to help really well position a brand for future growth. I think it can lead to like a loss of identity, and I think that's even a little subconscious. If we're focused on our competitors, will the ideas that we come up with on our own start to sort of look like our competitors? Sometimes I don't think we're trying to do that, but that can happen. And then I think that over focus on competitors can often lead to short-term thinking. Brands might prioritize immediate gains or more defensive tactics over long-term growth and sustainability. So instead of looking at what competitors are doing, maybe look at what's not being done, right? That mindset sort of encourages radical innovation and can lead to the creation of entirely new market categories, which will really help set apart a brand as a leader rather than a follower.
I would agree with what you said, Ange, but I do have a kind of a slightly different take on the opportunity around a competitor. I think there's a lot of people that go, oh, I love having competition. There's plenty of room around the table, blah, blah, blah. But I think the true gift of competition is that it gives you a villain. And every great story has a villain. In a way, you shouldn't ask who your competitor is. You should ask who your Voldemort is. Who's that name that shall not be said around the boardroom table of your product meetings? How can it really rally your troops and kind of build excitement within your brand? These people, they don't want to just eat your lunch. They want to eat your kids' lunch. They want to burn down your village, and they want to steal Elena's puppy. And that's a gift. When you have that kind of villain in your ecosystem, it really gives you a reason to get you up in the morning, and it can help provide edge and kind of clarity around who you are and your mission. So I do agree with everything you're saying, Ange, about you don't want to overcommit your mental energy to the competition, but I also think there's an opportunity that lives within that for your brand because, every hero needs a villain. And so it's kind of nice to be able to name them.
Yeah. And Rob, there's probably a difference between like internally thinking about competition and then externally advertising and positioning against your competition. Because I can see how it's not a great idea if you're Coke to constantly be mentioning Pepsi. You're just giving space to your competitor, but internally, I'm sure they can all rally around a competitor as close as them. Well, Ange, I know that we subscribe to some of the principles from Category Pirates, and their whole business is focused on making sure that you're in a category of one to succeed. So, how crucial do you think it is that brands are at that level of differentiation from their competitors?
Love category design, this discipline of developing new markets, right? And positioning yourself as the leader of that category. And the whole idea, for those that don't know, centers around this finding that companies that create and dominate their own category ultimately end up capturing the majority of the market's economics. So, love it. That said, obviously there are many companies, very successful ones, Fortune 500s, that aren't in a category of one. I've always loved the first 3 laws of immutable marketing. It's a book if folks haven't read that one, but first 3 laws, law of leadership, which is better to be first than it is to be better. The first mover often becomes synonymous with that category itself, and being the pioneer helps really establish a stronghold with your consumers. The second is law of category. If you can't be first in the category, set up a new category to be first in. So that really aligns with the Category Pirates belief system. And then the third is the law of the mind. I think this is where it opens the door. It's better to be first in the mind than first in the marketplace. That's where we open the door to not necessarily needing to be the category creator. I think what you're signing up for when you're playing in more of a red ocean space is needing to spend more time on how to win the pricing war, how to not be seen as a commodity, how to avoid customer confusion in a crowded space, losing mind share to competitors. So it's not an impossible effort, but I would unquestionably be putting my money in a new category if given a choice.
Gosh, that's such a good point. And when you think about the classic Apple and the MP3 player story, definitely not being the first in the MP3 space. There were people in the space for years, but they were the first to say 10,000 songs or 1,000 songs in your pocket back in the day. That was really owning a category in a way that no one had before, even though the product had already existed.
Well, and they unquestionably became first in the mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah, now they're doing a similar thing with AI where they're coming in later, but they're redefining the category. So I think that's positive for marketers, because there are some categories where if you're trying to get into home insurance, like what? You feel like there's just not a chance of outshouting some of these big brands, but you could come in with a different point of view, different target audience, and then potentially become the leader in a much smaller category to get going. Well, speaking of categories, I wanted to talk about category entry points, because there's a lot of different types of competition. There's like a high level brand competition, but then I also think there's like mini competitions for different category entry points. So Rob, could you give us a little Rob history lesson on the category entry point?
Cue that jingle.
It's time for Rob's History Lesson 3.
Category entry points, CEPs, are the magical moments when consumers think, I need this in my life. Imagine it like the precise second you realize you absolutely need a chocolate bar or 12 after a really bad client meeting. That's a CEP in action. Now, back in the day, marketing was like grandma's casserole, solid but predictable, right? Companies just boasted about their product features. But then the 60s and the 70s hit, and the marketers, they got groovy. They started studying consumer behavior like it was the new disco. Researchers like Philip Kotler made us realize that people don't just buy stuff, they buy experiences. Fast forward to the 80s and 90s, the era of neon and VHS. Marketers realized different folks had different triggers. Your mom bought a minivan because of family road trips, not because she dreamed of parallel parking a tank. Ads started targeting specific situations, and voila, CEPs started making more sense. Enter the 21st century with its internet wizardry. Marketers now track every click and scroll, turning CEPs into a science. You look up a lasagna recipe, and suddenly you're bombarded with ads for cheese graters and nonstick pans. Coincidence? I think not. Today's marketers aim to be your best friend, showing up exactly where you need them, like a superhero or a stalker with perfect timing. By understanding CEPs, brands can swoop in when you're most likely to say, hey, please take my money.
I feel like the Rob's history lessons are getting more theatrical every time. I love category entry points. I think they're really fun to think about. We spent some time documenting them for our own agency. And Rob, you just got me thinking about examples of how, speaking of competition, one way your brand could compete is looking at all the category entry points that are possible for what you're selling and then trying to figure out like where are their weaknesses. Maybe think about Temu and how they've chipped away at Amazon by, I think, creating a new category entry point, which is like interactive shopping, like entertainment through shopping. So if you're trying to go after an incumbent, those Super Bowl commercials, they were like very excited and finding new things and entertainment and quick and like dopamine. So that's maybe an example of a recent thing I've seen of a brand really advertising around a certain entry point and even designing like their product around some white space for an entry point.
Yeah, I'll confess, I'm a sucker for a good acronym, but I'd never heard of the CEP before. So this was an interesting way to frame it up.
Category entry points, super important, especially if you think about like in the B2B space and the 95-5 rule and how important that 95% is, given that only 5% are in market for your product or service at one time. General broad statement. Obviously, it varies. I'm going to give all the caveats. But if on average 95% are out of market, there are use case scenarios or experiences that those brands have that are going to bring them into market. What are those? What might they be experiencing, having challenges with? They might be undergoing leadership changes, things like that, that when you start to pen out what those might look like, your marketing evolves, how you can speak to these consumers or brands.
Yeah, it's also fun to think about what are some new ones I could create. So could I use marketing to create a different category entry point? I know we've thought about that for a marketer being interested in TV advertising. Like when they start maxing out on digital, do marketers automatically think TV? Well, maybe we could do some marketing and content and create that as a new category entry point and then own it. Well, let's move on. Another topic within competition is how your brand looks. So I want to talk about distinctive brand assets. And Jenny Romanuk is the leader on this subject. We actually just went through our own distinctive asset project at our agency. So this is very fresh, top of mind for me. So what are distinctive assets? They're unique brand elements that are easily recognizable by your audience and strongly associated with your brand. And I'm just not talking about your logo or your tagline. These could be jingles, colors, mascots, or even a specific type of packaging. Think McDonald's Golden Arches or the Netflix da-dum sound. You recognize those and you associate them with those brands right away. So when you're defining your distinctive assets, it's crucial to be aware of your competition's distinctive assets too. You want to make sure you're not accidentally reminding customers of another brand. And Jenny Romanuk has a book we took our team through at her agency called Distinctive Brand Assets, and it's amazing. It walked us through a whole exercise of how you can map out your distinctive assets and figure out which are distinct and then which have staying power. So that helped us recently update our logo and color at our agency, which we actually didn't even plan to do when we started this project, but her process was so clear, we started to realize, oh no, we actually look like a couple competitors and how do we stand out? So if you haven't seen our website in a while, you should go check it out. So distinctive brand assets, definitely important when you're looking at your competition as a marketer.
First of all, the process that your team went through, Elena, became so clear, leveraging that framework, right, to uncover kind of what we feel like we needed to be. So the strategic use of distinctive assets, super important. Once you start to understand, you're like, it sort of becomes a duh for you and obvious. Yeah, absolutely. I'm confusing my consumer even potentially. So I don't want to lose share in that way. I do think there's a but on this topic that, especially in the marketing world, I think we can get caught up in sometimes. Do you guys feel this way? I think sometimes a rebrand can be a Band-Aid that's masking a larger unresolved problem within the business. Like it's the new CMO comes in and guess what we're going to do? We're going to do a rebrand.
I agree, Ange. I think that's a big but. When you think about the ability for a CMO to come in and just go, I need to change the color of the wallpaper because I need to, and all of that brand equity that has built over the years gets tossed aside, is one of the potential costs of moves like that.
I think every new CMO, if they walk in and say they want to do a rebrand, they should have to read distinctive brand assets and go through this chart exercise, because Jenny Romanuk has you map out where do my assets fall, both in how memorable are they distinct, that could help you show that to your CEO and say, we should keep these assets. These are valuable because they are incredibly valuable. Like dumping a distinctive brand asset that's working is one of the worst things you can do. But then you could clearly show, all right, this is where we have a weakness. Do we want to spend the time to update it? I think you're right, Ange. Like a lot of times CMOs come in and they think just a fresh new brand is going to solve everything, but it could actually be the worst thing you could do as an incoming CMO if there's not data behind it.
Well, and marketers are creative individuals in their heart, I feel. Even if they're not on the creative team, like we love really charting out what do we want consumers to think and feel about who we are. And so it's not that a rebrand, like very often it does make sense. It's just, is it a part of a broader strategic vision, right? That can deliver long-term value? Then it's great.
Well, I want to make sure we cover probably this podcast's favorite topic, which is advertising, because we know advertising is key to this competitive discussion. It builds your share of voice, your mental availability. And I think we've covered those principles pretty well on the show. So I want to make sure we get a little more tactical here too. And how much do you think marketers should consider what their competitors are doing when they're planning out their marketing plan for the year?
Even before you go to your market or your competitors, just starting with what does academic and industry research indicate your sweet spot for advertising spend might be. Obviously, every business is unique. So there's no like one size fits all approach, and what you find in research might not apply, but by industry, you can find kind of the general ranges. There's a lot of documented research on, if you underspend, you might not reach full ROI potential. Just starting there to go, what would our target be if we knew nothing else, just given the research that's out there? And then I think having an understanding of your competitive set from a share of voice perspective is important. There's a lot out there from a research perspective on this topic too, just in terms of, are you confident in your ability to grow market share if you don't achieve share of voice that exceeds those of your competitors? Then there better be a big theory. You're going to have product-led growth, or you're expanding to retail, or those methods can drive growth too. But I think those things aside, if we want to grow, we have to have an understanding of what consumers are hearing and seeing in the marketplace in this like very fragmented, complex world of advertising that we see every single day. So I think those are some of the things to think through. This would be one that I do think it's important for marketers to have a better understanding, not competitor by competitor, but just overall, like what are the benchmarks we need to achieve or exceed in order to grow our business long term.
Speaking of being in a category of one, I think that you could look at media spend from that perspective too. I know we have a couple clients that are one of the only brands in their category on a channel like TV, and that can be a huge advantage. So that's where you could tell, like seeing where your competitor's at, where can you compete? Like there might be some channels where a competitor is just leading the way by such a wide margin. Your marketing team might decide, okay, let's shift to this platform instead. Let's approach it in a different way. So that's where being aware of what your competitors are doing and where they're spending probably makes sense. And I know there's some debate on the share of voice, market share, which I don't really want to get into on this podcast, but it makes logical sense to me too. Think about a channel like TV and the amount of reach you have and like the message you could get out to a wide audience every single day. If your competitor is there and you're not there, they're going to have more opportunities to reach a consumer, to have them make a purchase. We can debate how much does it actually correlate, and it varies by industry, and you shouldn't just depend on advertising. But I think you see like eventually brands, they get big enough where they do start to invest in advertising. Tesla's a great example where you just don't want to leave any stone unturned, and advertising can be a great way to grow and a great way to compete.
I mean, the right brand on the right channel can completely disrupt a category. Not to toot our own horn, but we saw that as a TV agency when we decided to bring the Hurricane to market. There was no other cane that was ever marketing on television, and we considered that an unfair advantage. We had a lot of experience in TV, and if we were going to launch a product, we were going to launch it on TV, and in a year, it was the number one selling cane in America. So I think that's just an example of, again, not to toot TV, you could do that with a different channel as well. When there's no one else there and you can be the loudest on it, you can really own something quickly.
I don't hear people talking about that a lot. Could channel be a competitive advantage? I just heard a marketer, Gymshark, on a podcast this morning, and they were talking about how influencers helped them disrupt like the athletic leisure wear category, because at the time when they launched, no one was doing it quite like Gymshark, and now they've built this empire like Gymshark influencers. And so they did that deliberately. They're like, what category can we win? I think Liquid Death is doing that a bit with the content they're producing. So yeah, I don't hear marketers talk about that as much, but that's kind of fun to think, like what advertising channel could help me differentiate. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. My favorite takeaway from this episode, which to be honest, I wasn't thinking about as much before we recorded, was from Ange, that focus on your customer. Are you making it easy for your customer to buy you and recognize you at the right time for the right thing? Like focusing there and then looking at what your competition is doing, but making sure you bring it back to how is this making the customer experience better seems like a good idea. So you don't get too just overly focused on what the competition is doing. It's like, okay, your coworker comes to you and says, oh, our competitor did this, this, and this. Okay, well, how does that look to our end customer? That could help you kind of filter it through. How much do I need to react to this? Does it fit our strategy? So it seems like it's very important to have a focus there, but there's definitely a mix and different ways to approach the competition depending on your category and what you're trying to do. Speaking of competition, thought we could close with this. What's your favorite rivalry of all time? And it doesn't have to be brand or marketing related.
So I'm going to have to go with the NDSU, North Dakota State University Bison.
Oh, that rivalry.
Oh, yeah. Versus the University of North Dakota Fighting Hawks. Biased because I play on the NDSU women's basketball team from 99 to 2003. And it was such a dynasty, guys, from 91 to 2001. So 10 years, either UND or NDSU competed in the national title every single year. NDSU took the title 5 times, UND took it 3 times. And beyond the title, there was just such a fierce energy at those games. Like, it was just so fun. Both, for those that don't know, historically, this is different now. Both universities were a part of the North Central Conference and NCAA Division II. Now they've moved to Division I. So the rivalry is not what it used to be, but so fun.
Love it. Well, that reminds me of a data-driven fact about this podcast. I believe our average height across our hosts is like 6'1" for this podcast. So name a taller podcast. Yeah.
Yes. I was going to say, I don't know how Conan averages out with the rest of his crew. Rob, what's yours?
Gosh, I was going to be a little spicy at first and throw out Jimmy Kimmel versus Donald Trump, but instead I'm going Jimmy Kimmel versus Matt Damon. I think it is still one of the funniest rivalries out there. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. But it's good yucks, and it's a lot of fun.
I also have a sports-related one. My favorite rivalry is Secretariat versus Sham, which is a racehorse rivalry. If you haven't seen the movie Secretariat, I would highly recommend it if you like any sort of sports movie. But Sham raced Secretariat in the 1973 Triple Crown races. He finished second to Secretariat in both the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness. And his time in the Kentucky Derby was actually also a record, but he was racing Secretariat. So Secretariat's records are more well known, but I think Sham helped push Secretariat to break all those records. So movie recommendation too, if you haven't seen Secretariat.
All right, decision time. Reese's Pieces versus M&M's. Elena, go.
Reese's Pieces.
Absolutely. Not even a contest.
God, I'm totally in agreement with you guys. Do you guys remember the branding incident that completely changed the trajectory of Reese's Pieces?
No.
So originally, E.T., you guys all remember E.T., the extraterrestrial, was to covet M&M's. That was going to be E.T.'s thing. M&M said, nope. We're not in on that. And so Reese's Pieces came in and said, you can use us. And the rest is delicious history.
Wow.
Another little mini history lesson. That was just a little one.
How a marketer gets fired history lesson. Ways to get yourself fired. Turn down the ET movie brand deal. Mm-hmm. Shoot.
Exactly.
That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. We'd like to thank Ayana Klaphocky for producing the show and Taylor De Los Reyes for editing. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you find the show valuable, please leave us a rating and review. And if you'd like to hear more from us, subscribe to our weekly email newsletter. It's built for marketers seeking research-first analysis of the latest trends. You can go to marketingarchitects.com/newsletter to subscribe. Now go forth and build great marketing. We've improved our distinctiveness.
Loving that new blue, Elena.
Protagonist blue.
The protagonist blue.
For real? It's actually called that?
Well, we named it that.
Oh.
It's called marketing, Rob.
Wow, that's impressive.
Marketing architects.